Joshua chapter 20 moves from the designation of the territories for each tribe to aspects that relate to the whole nation, and in fact, to aspects that will be critical for the ongoing settlement of the Israelites in the future. In chapter 20, we deal with the fascinating topic of the cities of refuge. We begin with the chapter itself, chapter 20, and the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, prepare for you cities of refuge, of which I spoke to you through Moses." So now Joshua gets the command to start preparing these cities of refuge, which were indeed already commanded to Moses, as we shall soon see in the Torah. What are these cities of refuge? So the verse elaborates, to which a slayer that kills any person unawares, unwittingly, shall flee, and they shall be for you as a refuge from the avenger of blood. So it's a place for people who unintentionally kill somebody to be able to flee from the danger of the avenger of blood. We'll elaborate soon. And he shall flee to one of those cities, and he shall stand at the entrance of the gate of the city, and shall declare his cause in the ears of the elders of that city. They shall take him into the city to them, and give him a place, and he shall dwell among them. And if the avenger of blood pursue him, then they shall not deliver the slayer into his hand, because he smote his neighbor unwittingly, and did not hate him from before. And he shall dwell in that city until he stand before the tribunal for judgment, until the death of the high priest that shall be in those days. So he'll be judged in the city of refuge, and if he is found to be an unwitting, unintentional killer, then he remains in the city until the death of the high priest. Then shall the slayer return and come to his own city and to his own house, to the city from which he fled. So only after the death of the high priest does he get permission to leave that city of refuge and return to his land. So that is the description of the purpose of the cities of refuge. And we had the command, and then we have the performance of the command. Most of the description is not found in the Old Greek version. Our version, the Masoretic version, is a little more elaborate than what we find in the Greek translation, which represents probably also an old Hebrew version of the text. It seems like the text was expanded, perhaps on the basis of verses in the Torah. So here's the performance. In our text, it says, and they set apart, in the plural, they, vayakdishu. In the Greek, it's in the singular, and he set apart, vayakadesh, apparently. And so here in our text, and they set apart, Kadesh in Galilee, Mount Naphtali, and Shechem in Mount Ephraim, and Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron in the mountain of Judah. And on the other side of the Jordan, at Jericho eastward, they had assigned Betzer in the wilderness upon the plain out of the tribe of Reuben, and Ramot in Gilad out of the tribe of Gad, and Golan in Bashan out of the tribe of Menashe. These were the cities set apart for all the children of Israel and for the stranger that sojourns among them, that whosoever kills any person unaware might flee there and not die by the hand of the avenger of blood until he stood before the tribunal. So we see here the issue of the cities of refuge, first of all, is an issue of proper process of judgment. We see that the purpose is so that he stand before the tribunal and not be killed without a judgment by the avenger of blood. And we see also the emphasis on equality in the system, so that anyone who is in such a situation, who might have unfortunately killed unintentionally another human being, can go into these cities. It doesn't matter if it is an Israelite or a stranger, he has the right to go in there, and the citizens of that city, the Levites, will give him harbor and protect him from the avenger of blood. And like I said, and the text itself says, this is already a command that was given to Moses, as of which I spoke to you through Moses. Where was this said, the issue of the commandment of the city of refuge? Well, it appears in several places. For one, in Shmot and Exodus, we read, it's Exodus chapter 21, we read the following: one who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. But one who did not stalk him, but God brought it about into his hand, I will make a place for you to which he shall flee. In other words, it wasn't intentional, but it happened, right? As an act of God, if you will. Then God says he will make a place for you to flee. That, of course, refers to the cities of refuge. But if a man plots deliberately against his friend to slay him with cunning, even from my altar you shall take him to die. In other words, there's an explicit statement here that these cities of refuge are directed only for unintentional killers, not for somebody who planned and plotted and was an intentional murder. This is a short description of the command that appears also in the Midbar, in the book of Numbers. We're talking about chapter 35, which begins with the commandment to give the Levites cities. And then in the continuation, it states in verse 6 in the chapter, among the cities you shall give to the Levites shall be 6 cities of refuge, which you shall provide as places to which a murderer can flee. In addition to them, you shall provide 42 cities. All right, so we have the statement that there will be amongst the Levite cities, also 6 cities of refuge. And later on, there's an elaboration. The Lord, in verse 9, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan to the land of Canaan, you shall designate cities for yourselves. They shall be cities of refuge for you. And a murderer who killed a person unintentionally shall flee there. These cities shall serve you as refuge from an avenger, so that the murderer shall not die until he stands in judgment before the congregation. The cities that you provide shall serve as 6 cities of refuge for you. You shall provide the 3 cities in Transjordan and the 3 cities in the land of Canaan. They shall be cities of refuge. Transjordan, east of the Jordan, 3 cities, and 3 cities in the west of the Jordan, what is termed the land of Canaan. These 6 cities shall be a refuge for the children of Israel and for the proselyte. Here it's a different translation, and resident among them, so that anyone who unintentionally kills a person can flee there. And then there's an elaboration, but if it was purposeful, then the murderer shall be put to death, etc. So here we see the commandment of 6 cities that are meant to be set aside after they cross the Jordan River. Right? When you cross the Jordan to the land of Canaan, then you have to designate these 6 cities. Interestingly enough, in the book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy, we read that 3 cities on the east in the Transjordan were already designated by Moses himself. In other words, there seems to be some tension between the commandments earlier that there's supposed to be cities that are set aside after they cross the Jordan, as opposed to what's written in Deuteronomy, where we read in chapter 4 as follows. Then Moses decided to separate 3 cities on the side of the Jordan towards the sunrise in the east, so that a murderer might flee there, he who murders his fellow man unintentionally, but did not hate him in time past, that he may flee to one of these cities so that he may live. And then there's a designation of the 3 cities again, Betzer in the desert in the plain country of the Reubenites, Ramoth and Gilad of the Gadites, and Golan in the Bashan of the Manassites. So surprisingly, Moses preempted and already set aside these 3 cities. Later on in Deuteronomy, in chapter 19, there'll be the commandment with regard to the following 3. We read as follows: when the Lord your God cuts off the nations whose land the Lord your God is giving you, and you inherit them and dwell in their cities and in their houses, you shall separate 3 cities for yourselves in the midst of your land, which the Lord your God is giving you to possess. So here we see the commandment for 3 additional cities that Moses states have to be set aside after they conquer on the west of the Jordan. That's because in Deuteronomy, Moses already set aside the first three on the east. Interestingly enough, later on in the chapter, there's a statement that if God expands your territory further, then we read in verse 9, if you will keep all this commandment to perform it, which I command you to this day, to love the Lord your God and to walk in his ways all the days, you shall add 3 more cities for yourself in addition to these 3. So we could end up theoretically with 9 cities if God expands our territory further on the west. We have 3 that Moses set aside on the east, 3 more that Moses now commands that have to be done, set aside in the west after they conquer. And that, of course, relates to the time of Joshua, and the specification that if God expands your territory further, then you'll set aside more commandments. So we have a couple of interesting, unique features here. One, Moses preempting the performance of the commandment, and even an elaboration, which seems to keep to that 6 cities that you have to set, but 3 of them, if God further expands your territory. This tension between what we see in the book of Numbers, where the commandments are only after they cross the Jordan, and Deuteronomy, where Moses already sets 3 apart, may be what lies behind the difference in the texts of our Masoretic Joshua and the Old Greek Joshua, whether the performance of the designation of the cities is found in plural, as we read in verse 7, and they set apart, and that could reference the fact that part of it was done by Moses and part by Joshua, and hence in the plural, whereas the Greek maybe was more in tandem with Numbers, where it was all to be done after they cross the Jordan, and hence it would be in singular, and he set apart because all was to be done or done by Joshua himself. So there may be some tension as far as who exactly and when the cities of refuge were set up in the east. Our sages, and it's brought in Rashi, basically try to correlate between the two and say Moses indeed set apart 3 cities already in his time in the east, because the eastern part of the Jordan was conquered in the time of Moses. Moses didn't cross the Jordan, but he already began the conquests in the east, which included 2 nations, the Amorites, Sihon, the king of the Amorites, and Og, the king of Bashan, who were conquered. And so he set those cities apart and initiated it, even though they weren't actually functional until the conquests in the west. And that's how they tried to balance between the two. And here we learn how Moses was eager to perform commandments as early as he could. And even though it was meant to be left for later on after they crossed the Jordan, Moses wanted to preempt, and he had already the capacity, because the parts in the east were already conquered, to set apart at least cities in the east that actually came into function only later on with the other 3 in the west. So let's try to understand the significance of these cities of refuge, which, as we can see, play a pretty big role, both already in the Torah, with mention in 3 books, in the book of Exodus, Shmot, in the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, and in the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, and once again here in our chapter in the book of Joshua. So how are we to understand these cities of refuge? We will look into some of the commentators and their understanding. So I'll begin with Sefer HaChinuch, the book of education, if you will, that lists and elaborates the commandments of the Torah. We don't exactly have, it's an anonymous author. He was a Levite from Spain, 13th century, according to many scholars. So this famous book, look how he writes, and it's very interesting to see the dual aspect of his understanding in reference to the cities of refuge. So he says as follows: at the root of the precept lies the reason that the crime of killing is utmostly serious, for in it lies the destruction of the world, so much so that the sages of blessed memory taught that if a person kills someone deliberately, even if he has observed all the commandments, he is not saved from judgment. It doesn't help you if you keep all the other commandments, but you murdered, you will not be saved from judgment. It is therefore proper for one who killed even unintentionally, since such a great misfortune occurred by his hand, that he should suffer for it the anguish of exile, which is almost equal to the anguish of death, since a man is then separated from his friends and his native ground, and he lives all his days with strangers. So here we have an understanding that the city of refuge is somewhat of a form of punishment, of exile for the unintentional killer. And here we learn how the Torah views the act as even carrying some culpability. You are totally right. This happened unintentionally, but there's a certain aspect of negligence involved. You weren't careful enough, and hence there's a punishment to pay. You didn't mean it, but you were negligent. You weren't careful enough. You drove too fast on the road, right? If we take it in modern times, right? Or you weren't careful when, I don't know, using your gun and it fired off unintentionally and killed somebody. All these, you didn't mean it, but there's a price to pay. And this involves a punishment of exile. That's one side of this city of refuge commandment. But then he continues, moreover, there is a rectification in the community through this precept in the sense that scripture explains, for in this way he will be rescued from the hand of the blood avenger, that he should not kill him when there was no evidence in his hands, since he had done it unintentionally. So here the chinuch says there's also another aspect to the command, and that's what's explicitly stated in the text, to save the unintentional killer from the avenger of blood. There's a concern here that the avenger of blood will take the law into his own hands and avenge the death of his relative, and hence we have to protect the unintentional killer. So there's on the one side an aspect of punishment, on the other side there's an aspect of protection for the unintentional killer. As far as the issue of protection from the avenger of blood, well, why do we need this? So here, let's go and try to further understand the whole custom of blood vengeance, which is something which is common in the ancient Near East and also in later times. In fact, it's actually still exists in our times in let's say Bedouin culture, and to a certain extent even in all mafia cultures. So the historian Robertson Smith, in his book, The Religion of the Semites, writes as follows. The practical test of kinship is that the whole kin is answerable for the life of each of its members. In Semitic culture, the issue of the tribe is very powerful, the extended family, the chamula. By the rules of early society, if I slay my kinsman, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, the act is murder and is punished by expulsion from the kin. If my kinsman is slain by an outsider, I and every other member of my kin are bound to avenge his death by killing the manslayer or some member of his kin. Blood revenge applies to manslaughter, i.e. to the killing of a stranger. And in that case, the dead man's kin make no effort to discover and punish the individual slayer. They hold his whole kin responsible for his act and take vengeance on the first of them on whom they can lay hands. So Smith points out that there wasn't always this distinction between intentional and unintentional. You killed, you're in trouble. If you killed somebody from your own kin, you're expelled. And if somebody killed somebody else, a foreigner from another tribe, killed somebody from your tribe, then you have the obligation of vengeance. And it's not a personal obligation. It's an obligation upon the whole tribe, and it's to take vengeance upon the tribe of the killer, not necessarily the killer himself. And of course, this creates a cycle of violence, of killing and vengeance, etc. This is the status. That is the custom of blood vengeance, the blood avenger. Now, parallel to this custom of blood vengeance, there developed also a concept of refuge, place of protection against, right, vengeance, and in general, place of protection against the hands of the law. And here we read from the Roman historian Tacitus in the Annals that this custom continued on late, not only in the ancient times, but also in the classical period. He reads as follows: Tiberius, however, while tightening his grasp on the solid power of the Principate, vouchsafed to the Senate a shadow of the past by submitting the claims of the provinces to the discussion of its members. For throughout the Greek cities, there was a growing laxity and impunity in the creation of rights of asylum. The temples were filled with the dregs of the slave population. The same shelter was extended to the debtor against his creditor and to the man suspected of a capital offense. Nor was any authority powerful enough to quell the factions of a race which protected human felony equally with divine worship. It was resolved, therefore, that the communities in question should send their charters and deputies to Rome. So there's a problem now. When the Romans are conquering areas, they see that there are a lot of temples that are used as places of asylum. And who's reaching those places of asylum? All criminals, including murderers, doesn't matter, right? Everybody who can escapes there, whoever's in trouble, without distinction whether he's really liable or not. This was the reality. There was acts of vengeance, and there were cities of asylum, temples of asylum, where even criminals took harbor. Now comes the Torah into this reality, and what does it do? Well, on the one hand, it holds on to this idea of places of asylum, but tries to distinguish and say this place of asylum is only for unintentional killers, not for the murderers, and not for people who have to face the law and get punished, but for those who performed acts unintentionally. Now, on the one hand, maybe they have certain culpability. There was some negligence, not a total accident out of the blue, right? In such a case, according to at least halacha, there wouldn't be the obligation to go to a city of refuge. But we're talking about a case where there's some negligence, but it was unintentional. So we keep the city of refuge, the idea of places of asylum, but only for them, on the one hand. But the interesting question is, why does the act of the avenger continue? It seems like a very problematic custom of taking vengeance. And to this, we turn to Shadal, Rabbi Shmuel David Luzzatto of Italy, of the beginning of the 19th century, who was also, besides being a rabbi, also well-learned and scholarly, and apparently also aware of general history as well. So he writes as follows, very interesting. In early times, before people were organized under a king, ministers, judges, and officers, every family took revenge against other families, and the closest relative of the dead was responsible to avenge his death. The Torah established judges and officers and transferred the responsibilities of avenging a killing from individuals to the community. Now, in the case of murder, it was possible to mollify the avenger by telling him to leave it to the judges to investigate and execute the killer if found guilty of murder. However, when the killing was unintentional, it was impossible to mollify the avenger and oblige him to watch he who killed his father or brother remain unpunished. He and his acquaintances would interpret this, his inaction, to be proof that he does not love his father or brother, since he does not avenge their death. Now, it was impossible to totally uproot this attitude. This was so entrenched in the culture that you couldn't just undo this sense of responsibility to avenge. The divine wisdom knew that condemning the avenger to death when avenging an unintentional killing would not prevent all or even most of the avengers from avenging the death of their relatives. It was something so powerful that even if you'd punish the avenger, it wouldn't stop the phenomenon. Therefore, what did the Torah do? It left the avenger the right to avenge the killing of his kin, but designated places of refuge where the unintentional killer could seek protection and in which the avenger is unable to kill him. So according to Shadel, it's kind of a facing up with reality that you can't uproot totally the whole phenomenon, and therefore the best way to combat it is by at least giving a place of refuge for the unintentional killer. But if we keep in mind also what the Chinuch, Sefer HaChinuch said, if the Torah also views a certain responsibility and culpability in the unintentional killer, so we can also see an aspect of punishment, not only protection, and therefore the whole thing is not just facing up with reality and perhaps what would be considered not the ideal, but basically a sacrifice with facing the hard reality of preponderance of vengeance, but rather even maybe an aspect of an ideal in that the Torah views the negligence, killing by negligence as something so harsh that it's not, oh, I didn't mean it, so okay, you're off the hook. No, there's a price to pay even when you do this unintentionally. And then we might view this whole structure of the avenger and the city of refuge as part of the system. In other words, what keeps the unintentional killer in his cell, if you will, in his city, and prevent him from coming back and living a normal life now at home? Well, he has to be wary of the avenger. So kind of one keeps the other at bay. On the flip side, we don't want vengeance to be taken, but we do want, let's say, a certain punishment to be paid for the spilling of blood. So we see this as something very central in the Torah, combating the issue of and relating to the phenomenon of people being killed, even unintentionally, by negligence, and viewing this as something very harsh. And hence we see that this is done immediately after they settle down and immediately after they cross the Jordan River. Joshua sets aside the cities in the west. According to the book of Deuteronomy, Moses already set aside the cities on the east. Okay, so that's chapter 20, the cities of refuge, immediately following the allocation of the land to the tribes. We still have, though, one tribe that is homeless, that did not receive a land, and that is the tribe of Levi. The Levites, they did not receive a land, and this is the topic of chapter 21. So we move now to chapter 21. Yeah. Okay. So we read as follows. And the heads of the fathers of the Levites approached Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of the fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel. So now the heads of the Levites approach the leadership, and they spoke to them in Shiloh, in the land of Canaan, saying, the Lord commanded through Moses to give us cities to dwell in, and the open land around them for our cattle. This was a commandment already by Moses to give the Levites cities. They don't receive a territory, but they receive cities. And the children of Israel gave to the Levites from their inheritance, according to the commandment of the Lord, these cities and the open land around them. And the lot went out for the families of the Kohathites and the children of Aaron, the priest, who were of the Levites, had by lot from the tribe of Judah and from the tribe of Shimon and from the tribe of Benjamin, 13 cities. And the rest of the children of Kahat had by lot 10 cities from the families of the tribe of Ephraim and from the tribe of Dan and from the half tribe of Manasseh. And the children of Gershon had by lot, we're talking about the different families amongst the Levites. We had Aaron the priest, right, who received land from Judah, Shimon, and Benjamin. And then the rest of the children of Kahat received from Ephraim, Dan, and Menashe. We're moving from south, going in the mainland, up north, furthermore to central land. That's Ephraim and Menashe, and part of the tribe of Dan. And then we go to the other branch of the Levite family, the children of Gershon, and they got by lot from the families of the tribe of Issachar, and from the tribe of Asher, from the tribe of Naphtali, from the half tribe of Menashe and Bashan, 13 cities. So now we're going up further north. And finally, for the last branch, and for the children of Merari, according to their families, they were 12 cities from the tribe of Reuben, and from the tribe of Gad, and from the tribe of Zebulun. So Reuben and Gad are even on the east of the Jordan. So we see a movement from south, going up north, and then to the east. And the children of Israel gave to the Levites by lot these cities with the open land around them, as the Lord had commanded through Moses. And then there's an elaboration of all the cities. And they gave to the tribe of the children of Judah, from the tribe of the children of Judah, and from the tribe of the children of Shimon, these cities that will be mentioned by name. So and it was the children of Aaron, of the families of the Kohathites, of the children of Levi, for theirs was the first lot. And they gave them the city of Arba, father of Anak, which is Hebron. That's Kiryat Arba, right? The city of Arba, Kiryat Arba, and Hebron. That was given to Aaron, the Kohanites, and also the land around it. So we see here the allocation of the land to the tribe of Levi. That includes the descendants of Aaron, the priests, the Kohanim, as well as the rest of the Levites. Now, as was stated specifically in the book of Joshua, this refers already back to the commandments that were found in the book, in the Torah, that were already commanded by Moses. And indeed, we read in Numbers 35, in the beginning of the chapter, that the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, saying, command the children of Israel that they give the Levites cities to dwell in from the inheritance of their possessions. You shall also give the Levites common land around the cities. They shall have the cities to dwell in, and their common land shall be for their cattle, for their herds, and for all their animals. And then there's elaboration, how much land they receive, and which ones. And of course, this includes also the 6 cities of refuge, right? Among the cities, you'll give also 6 cities of refuge. So all the cities you will give to the Levites shall be 48, right, in total. So all the cities you will give 48, these you shall give with their common land. And there's an elaboration, and the cities which you will give shall be from the possession of the children of Israel. From the larger tribe you shall give many, from the smaller you shall give few. Each shall give some of its cities to the Levites. It has to be spread out amongst the tribes. It's generally equal, but a few more from Judah, it's a little larger, in proportion to the inheritance that each receives. Okay, so this is what we're reading in the book of Numbers and Bamidbar. Interestingly, right after the issue of giving the land, the cities, to the Levites, we read about the commandment of the cities of refuge. That's immediately following. We finished verse 8, and now we read verse 9. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall appoint cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who kills any person accidentally may flee there. So we see in the original commandments in the book of Numbers, the ordering is first the cities of the Levites, and then the cities of refuge. Whereas in Joshua, it's flipped over. We first have the cities of refuge, and then later on, the issue of the cities of the Levites. Why is this flipped over? So I think the logic behind it is an issue of practical urgency versus the presentation of the idea. In Numbers, when it's not immediately urgent, it's just a commandment for the future. When they cross, right? When they cross and they finish conquering the land, then they have to allocate the cities. So there's the first, the ideal is, okay, we have to make sure that the Levites get their cities. Then to face the idea of unintentional death, we also have to make sure that some of these cities are cities of refuge. Practically speaking, as far as urgency is concerned, the book of Joshua, when he comes to actually perform the commandment, first treats the issue of cities of refuge. And why so? Perhaps because this involves life, saving lives, right? There's danger. There's danger that the avenger can take vengeance and kill a person who doesn't deserve death, who was an unintentional killer. And hence, this is performed first, right? And then the rest of the cities of the Levites are allocated secondarily. So that might be the tension between ideal, where, the city of Levites is brought in first, and then for the very tragic circumstances of an unintentional killing, we also relate to the cities of refuge amongst them. In reality, in practicality, the first immediate concern is the issue of preventing the spilling of innocent blood, and hence we begin with the cities of refuge in actuality in the book of Joshua. So, as far as understanding the status of the Levites, we see here that the tribe of Levi doesn't actually receive a territory, a land. They receive cities that are spread across all the tribes, right? How did this come to be? Why are the Levites different from all the rest of the Israelites? Why is the tribe of Levi different from all the other tribes? So the background to this is, of course, also in the Torah, and we'll just elaborate to understand this unique aspect of the settlement of the Levites spread amongst all the tribes and cities in each tribe. So first we read in the book of Numbers in the beginning that the Levites were taken from the Israelites. We read as follows: the Lord spoke to Moses saying, I hereby take the Levites from among the Israelites in place of all the firstborn, the first issue of the womb among the Israelites. The Levites shall be mine, for every firstborn is mine. At the time that I smote every firstborn in the land of Egypt, I consecrated every firstborn in Israel, man and beast, to myself to be mine, the Lord's. So now God says, well, I have rights upon you. I struck all firstborn in Egypt, and by saving your firstborn, I basically have I own them. I have rights over the firstborn, right? Okay, but that relates to the firstborn of each family. How does that relate to the Levites? You said you took the Levites. So the background to this is, of course, the story of the sin of the golden calf, where we read in Exodus chapter 32 as follows: as soon as Moses came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, he became enraged, and he hurled the tablets from his hands and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. Moses stood up in the gate of the camp and said, whoever is for the Lord, come here. And all the Levites rallied to him. He said to them, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, each of you put sword on thigh, go back and forth from gate to gate throughout the camp and slay brother, neighbor, and kin. The Levites did as Moses had bidden, and some 3,000 of the people fell that day. And Moses said, dedicate yourselves to the Lord this day, for each of you has been against son and brother, that he may bestow a blessing upon you today. In other words, the Levites gained special status. They did not sin in the golden calf, and they also avenged, right, and punished the Israelites for this at the command of Moses. And as a consequence of this, they received a status of being servants of the Lord, and then they come in place of the firstborn. And this we read, first of all, that the Levites were not counted in the census. In the original census, it stated explicitly, the Levites, however, were not tallied among them by their ancestral tribe, for the Lord had spoken to Moses, saying, do not on any account tally the tribe of Levi, or take a census of them with the Israelites. You shall put the Levites in charge of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, all its furnishings and everything that pertains to it. They shall carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings, and they shall tend it, and they shall camp around the tabernacle, right, etc. This is the unique status, right, of the Levites. They aren't counted with the rest of Israel. The rest of Israel, they're counted, the army, but the Levites, you can say, are the servants of God. They're the army of God. They are responsible for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle, for keeping it, and hence they also in the desert dwelled around the tabernacle with the tribes around them. So they weren't counted, and that's because, according to the commentator Rashbam, the normal census was a military census, and the Levites were exempt from military service. They were numbered separately for the purpose of taking up service at the sanctuary. They have their own service, and it wasn't within the army, and therefore they weren't counted amongst them. And the sages really said that, oh, this was a unique unit, right? Where God says you don't count them with the rest. Why were they not numbered with Israel? Because the tribe of Levi was the palace guard. This may be illustrated by the parable of a king who had many legions and said to the commander in chief, go and number all the legions except my own personal one. So the Holy One, blessed be, said to Moses, howbeit the tribe of Levi you shall not number among the children of Israel. You may not number them among the children of Israel, but separately number them. For it is not consonant with the dignity of a king that his own legion should be numbered with the other legions. Israel's therefore were numbered separately, and the tribe of Levi separately. They had a special status as a special unit in service of the king. Okay, and as we read in the book of Joshua, the children of Israel gave these cities, right, to the Levites. And if we continue on in chapter 21, after the elaboration of all the cities, right, we read till Kiryat Arba, Hebron, that was given to the Kohathites. A summary of, we won't read all because it's pretty lengthy, with a lot of just lists of cities and elaborate, but the summary reads as follows. All the cities of the Levites within the possession of the children of Israel were 48 cities with their common lands. Every one of these cities had its common land surrounding it. Thus were all these cities. Okay, so they had their own cities. Why? Why do the Levites not get land and receive cities spread out amongst the tribes? So this was already inherent, I think, in the initial commandments, right, and also in the description of the roles of the Levites. So we read in Numbers chapter 3 that the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, advance the tribe of Levi and place them in attendance upon Aaron the priest to serve him. They shall perform duties for him and for the whole community before the tent of meeting, doing the work of the tabernacle. They shall take charge of all the furnishings of the tent of meeting, a duty on behalf of the Israelites, doing the work of the tabernacle. You shall assign the Levites to Aaron and to his sons. They are formally assigned to him from among the Israelites. So here in this description, we see that the Levites are actually representatives of the Israelites, right? They're working on behalf of the Israelites, remembering that they come instead of the firstborn, which was supposed to come from each family, but because the firstborn sinned also in the golden calf, so instead we have the Levites who perform these duties on behalf of the Israelites. So in this aspect, it's as if the Levites are the messengers of the Israelites. And as such, right, they are given land, cities, by the Israelites, because in return for the work that the Levites are doing for the nation, they also are given by the nation cities to dwell in. If we continue reading that chapter, there's a different perspective. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I hereby take the Levites from among the Israelites in place of all the firstborn. The first issue of the womb among the Israelites, Levites shall be mine, for every firstborn is mine. And at the time that I smote every firstborn in the land of Egypt, I consecrated every firstborn in Israel, man and beast, to myself to be mine, the Lord's. So here we might ask, are the Levites gods, or are the Levites part of the community and belong to the community? Are they the messengers of the community, or are they messengers of God? And I believe the answer is that the Levites are both. They actually, where are they placed when they travel in the desert? Around the tabernacle, between the tabernacle and the people. So you can say that the Levites, on the one hand, represent the people before God, and on the other hand, in the other direction, they represent God before the people. So as far as their responsibilities vis-a-vis the people, they are furnished by the people cities amongst the tribes. Why, though, are the Levites given cities spread out amongst all the tribes? Why not just give them places of dwelling around the tabernacle, which will be built, right, and constructed also in the land of Israel? And later on, the temple will come in its stead. Why are they spread out throughout all the tribes? And for this, we move to Deuteronomy to understand also an additional aspect of the role of the Levites. They don't only function as servants in the tabernacle, they have another important function. They, the Levites, shall teach your laws to Jacob and your instructions to Israel. The Levites are teachers. Now let's consider this brilliant arrangement. The first thing that the book of Joshua takes care of is we have to prevent spilling of blood. That relates to the cities of refuge. But there's another important thing that we have to take care of immediately, and that is the education of the people, of the children. And for that, we need educators. What do we have to set up? School system, an educational system. How did they do that in the ancient times? This is the Levite cities. The Levite cities are spread amongst all the tribes, and they are supposed to teach the laws to all the people. They don't have their own land, right? They have cities spread out amongst the tribes in order to be with the people and teach them. And hence we can see the two primary important aspects after settling the land and having homes is one, preventing the spilling of blood. If you want, part of the criminal justice system to prevent spilling of blood. And then we have the educational system set up by the Levites. And in fact, they go in tandem because the cities of refuge were also amongst the cities of the Levites. And if you will, maybe even those unintentional killers had a certain goal to receive the education from the Levites and perhaps help them make themselves more sensitive to the issue of being careful in relation to the spilling of blood. All this we can see as the first and initial actions taken after the land is conquered and after it's allocated. These are the first two things, right? Ensuring the prevention of the spilling of blood right away, and also setting up the educational system via the establishment of the cities of the Levites throughout the land. If we return to the conclusion of the chapter, again, you share. So at the end of the chapter, after the lengthy list of the cities, we read all the cities of the Levites, etc., were 48. Verse 40. These cities shall be to the Levites, each city and its open land around, thus shall it be for all the cities. And then we have a conclusion. And the Lord gave to Israel the entire land that he swore to give to their fathers, and they inherited it and dwelled in it. And the Lord gave them rest from about, according to all that he swore to their fathers, and no man of all their enemies stood before them. The Lord delivered all their enemies into their hand. Not a thing was lacking from all the good things that the Lord spoke to the house of Israel. All came to pass. We see the predominance of the word all, right? Everything, all came to pass, right? All the good things, all their enemies into their hands, right? Etc. Everything came to be. The word kol, that's the translation of the Hebrew, kechol asher nishba, according to all that he swore, and later on mikol oivehem, and once again lo nafal mikol hadavar asher diber Hashem beit Israel hakol ba, everything. So here you have kind of like an idyllic description of everything being fulfilled. We see that there are other points in Joshua where not all the land was conquered. There's still pockets and there's still places that require more effort. But here we have kind of an idyllic description, a general idyllic description. And the focus on the word kol, all, kind of closes circle with the beginning of the book of Joshua. If we return to the first chapter, Joshua chapter 1, we recall the key word in that chapter was indeed that word kol. I've highlighted them. You see kol, kol, kol in English. To all this nation, all the people, right? Every place, all places that you'll step, sometimes translated every or all, kol haaretz, right? All the land, once again, right? So we had all the promises in the beginning of the book of Joshua in chapter 1, that everything will be fulfilled if we keep the whole Torah and all the people remain united together. Then they will have all the success and all the land. And here, in the conclusion of chapter 21, there seems to be a kind of summary of a closing circle and returning to that fulfillment of all the promises as they were made. The Israelites have settled down. They've received their lands, each tribe with its allocation. The cities of refuge have been set up, and the tribe of Levi with their cities have also been established. How will the story play out in the continuation, the closing chapters of the book of Joshua? That we will see next time.